When you're speaking to an audience or recording a video for your channel, do your hand gestures add to what you're saying, or do they distract and confuse your audience? If you mean to say that a square looks like this and a circle looks like this, was it because you were nervous and just messed up, or just not practiced in sending proper hand gestures while speaking? Part of mastering your communication skills is about being more thoughtful and intentional of the hand gestures you use while speaking. Even though hand gestures are a major component of our overall body language, in this video, we're going to just stick to hand gestures. As a way to communicate a shared meaning without words, there are 7 basic yet important categories of hand gestures you need to use while speaking that should be deliberate and practice movements that can make you a more vibrant and engaging speaker. Expressing yourself with hand gestures without thinking is normal. However, when there's an excessive amount of movement or the gestures are not clear in what they represent and mean, it can often be distracting, confusing, and a real turnoff. Think about how many times you've seen someone using too many hand gestures that distracted you from what was being said or made no sense. It's probably more than you realize. Appropriate hand gestures and their timing adds a higher level of meaning by repeating, emphasizing, reinforcing, and strengthening what you're saying. Hand gestures can also be used to substitute words and can also contradict what you're saying if used incorrectly or in the wrong situation. For instance, rookie scuba divers like to use this gesture instead of this one to say they're okay, when in fact this is the common sign that says the dive is over and it's time to head back to the surface now. To get the most out of this video, empty your hands and practice along with me as we dive deeper into the 7 categories of hand gestures that you should intentionally be using while speaking. Number 1. The first and most common purposeful hand gestures you should be using and actually practicing is how to display quantity of numbers on your fingers. When displaying your fingers to list, count, show a score, or provide quantity, make sure you hold your hand in a way that's easily and clearly seen whether you're presenting to a live audience or on camera. The reason you should practice this is to be sure you're using enough authority in displaying the numbers. That means don't just let your fingers hang there like you're too weak or lazy to hold them up. By using a sharp, purposeful, and intentional motion, you can also increase your audience's engagement and keep their attention focused on your topic. Just to make sure I'm covering all of the bases on using your fingers to display quantity, which fingers should you start with? You can start with your thumb, your index finger, but what about your pinky? No, probably not. Based on your dexterity, consider going with what feels comfortable and works best for you. And then, a very important point to consider is where should you hold your hand? This depends on your environment. An easy way to remember this is the more distance there is between you and your audience, the further and higher your hand should be from your body. However, when recording a video, whether you're sitting or standing as I do, hold your hand at about shoulder level so your smiling face and fingers are all in the frame shot together. Number 2. Don't be afraid to make a movement that shows 2 or more different levels of things. When showing different levels of things, you can use one hand or both, depending if you're holding something, such as your microphone or your cell phone. You should use hand gestures to display different levels of the importance of topics, different levels of height, the level of volume both in sound and quantity, or even brightness and darkness. Incremental steps and chronological steps can be displayed by using specific gestures and movements too. You should even use leveling gestures when discussing starting points, say from over here, then moving to over here. Here's a good example of how to amplify your leveling gestures to have the maximum effect of the movement when on camera. Be sure of where you're starting and stopping the movement to stay in the frame and not block your face. If you're trying to show a big difference between levels, you need to start your gesture towards the edge of the frame shot or be zoomed out enough to leave plenty of room for the final stopping point of your movement. To show volume with one hand, it might look like this. With 2 hands, it might look like this. When you're showing how small or large something is, make sure that your hands stay in the frame. Whatever gesture you use to show levels, make the movements noticeable enough so that there's a clear difference between them. Also, be aware of where your hands are in relation to your face and the camera, so we can see your smiling face as you hold eye contact too. And of course, practice your motions before using them to be sure it's the best movement to show what you're describing. Number 3, when you're comparing 2 or more things, you can use one or both hands. It just depends on if you're describing ideas, concepts, or topics with words such as right and wrong, good and bad, pros and cons. And you can and should show the relative importance of each side of an issue by adding perceived weight in your hands to help your audience visualize of what you're talking about. You can even use what I call a pinch and place type of gesture to put an imaginary object in thin air. And or of course, if you're recording, you can always edit in the object. When you're comparing 2 or more physical objects that you have to pick up, such as water bottles, be careful and thoughtful of where you place them and where you're going to set them down so you don't actually accidentally knock them over. Now, for a real challenge. If you're discussing opposing forces, say those on the left and those on the right, is your left hand on the left as someone is watching your video, or is it your right hand? This is an easy fix with a test shot to see if your camera is shooting a mirrored image or not. Sometimes there's not an option to flip your image, but if there is, do so to make it easier for your viewers to relate better to what you're saying and showing. Number 4, when I'm relating something to you, I generally would use a motion that looks like I'm providing something to you. The motion starts from my core with my palms facing in, then blossoming out towards you as if I'm offering something personal for you to take. When you're describing yourself, use hand motions that come towards your body, with your fingers and palms facing inwards. Generally, a good place to do this is in the heart region or center of the chest. When you're talking about us or we, you generally would use a motioning pattern that indicates a connection between us, or maybe a circling motion to indicate that we're all in this together. You can also use your hands to form a bowl. That's a great symbol of oneness. Practice your gestures to find out what works best for you, to see what feels right and what looks good on camera. Number 5, pointing at something you want to bring attention to is great, but it's generally not a good gesture to poke in your viewer's face. If I point at you like this, you might feel like I'm waggling my finger in your face and accusing you of something. You know what I'm talking about, right? Another real issue to consider when pointing is whether your thumb should be up like you're aiming a weapon or be down wrapped around your fingers as if you're going to punch something. If you're a pointer and want to stop, remember this. When someone points something sharp in your face, what's your natural reaction? It's not nice, is it? Try this out instead. To show somebody that you're pointing to them, use an open hand motion with the palm facing mostly horizontal for a statement. Or you can use your palm up for a question as if you're asking for them to put something in your hand. The answer, whatever you do, avoid using a palm down motion to point. This sends a subconscious signal of dominance over someone, and besides, it looks like a snake about to attack. Number 6, your gestures should support what you're saying. Think of yourself as a living, breathing emoji that does more than just show up in a text. A problem with using gestures to support what you're saying is that they can often be misinterpreted or confusing if there's no shared meaning of what they mean. Effective gestures need to be practiced, and most important of all is they need to be comfortable for you to use while looking natural at the same time. As an example, take the common and humble thumb. Turned up, it generally means great job, all's good, and shows the support of approval. Turned down, and it means fail, no go, or add a little motion to it, and it means you're out of here. Hitchhikers use it to say, "Can I have a ride?" And as I mentioned before, as a scuba diver, it means the dive is over and it's time to surface. And in some cultures, this can be used as an insult, like flipping someone off with your middle finger. By being thoughtful and intentional with your hand gestures you use while speaking can also have a big impact on audience participation too. And that brings us to number 7. To engage your audience and get them to participate with an action, you should use prompting gestures that demonstrate exactly what action you want them to take. Instead of just asking someone to do something, actually show them what you'd like for them to do just before and at the same time you're telling them. Watch how this works. Speaking of prompting, if you find this video is providing you with valuable information, Go ahead and tap that thumbs up to let me know that you like what I'm doing, and it tells the YouTube algorithm that it's worth sharing with other people too. Thanks, I truly appreciate it. See, that wasn't so hard. If you remember nothing else, a key takeaway from learning about using hand gestures while you speak is this. Depending on the environment you're speaking in and how far away you are from your audience should determine how big and how long you should make and hold your gestures. To be a more vibrant and engaging speaker, take the time to experiment and practice using, controlling, and adjusting your hand gestures to boost your on-camera and live presentation charisma and presence. To continue exploring your journey of becoming a more effective communicator, watch the video on your screen next. And remember that my goal is that your success is the goal in mastering all areas of your communication skills in school, at work, and in your life. I'll see you online soon.